Leaving and going to go to the service. We had prayer together. That dates us both, Jeff. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to date us both that bad, but we sure appreciate that. Thank you so very much. Junior high, senior high, this is your opportunity to leave. Today, as I said, I had the opportunity to grow up hearing many of World War II stories and knowing the women that served, and to hear my dad talk about it. So today the sermon is the liberating touch of Jesus. I couldn't help but think about the liberation of Europe whenever the men and women would go in and liberate the country from the captivity that Hitler had it under. And it was such a tough time. Today on Memorial Day, I want to be talking about held captive. The thought of being held captive, being trapped by anything, that's frightening. I think that'd be frightening for all of us. Yet throughout our lives, each of us have had some experience where we've heard it over and over again on the radio or the TV. We've been exposed to it in so many ways. Let me take some of you back all the way to 1979. 1979 was a very tough time for us in America. America was held captive, 52 Americans held captive in the U.S. Embassy in Iran, 444 days. Now, all of us who are of the age to remember that, we remember how terrifying that was. Every evening on the news, we would hear about it. And then towards, at various points, we would hear that there was our hostages, the hostages that they had that were our people were in danger. Or we would hear false reports that they're going to be set free. And it was a very terrifying time and a very aggravating time for Americans. We didn't want any American being held hostage, and it was a tough time for us. In 2010, there was a different type of hostage situation. The earth was holding 33 men hostage below ground in Chile. The copper gold mine had collapsed, and we watched each evening as they were devising a plan. We knew the men were alive, but they were trying to find a way to go down and get them. And while they were there, 69 days. And then, you know, I've thought about that over and again because that was a very terrifying time. They were trapped. I'm not good being trapped. And they were trapped down there. And they had limited light and limited everything. But whenever they come out, seldom did we hear anything about it, but they come out of a hole about this big. Now I want you to think how terrifying that would have been, coming up through the ground in that hole, thinking, is there going to be another collapse? And here I am in this cylinder. And then perhaps one of the most terrifying for most of us, and especially all of us who are parents, in 2013, there was a captivity in Cleveland. 3 young women had been held hostage for 11 years as sex slaves. It made us mad. It made us mad, you know, because here we don't expect that in America, and that's probably just one, and they say there's probably other situations that we're probably not aware of. How disgusting and terrible. These 3 stories, they linger in our hearts, but there's many stories throughout our lives that we've heard where there's been that captivity of the land holding people. I remember the little girl that was down the well in Texas. Some of you will remember that story. Whether it's the land or people holding other people hostage or governments holding people hostage, and it was all scary. And then, of course, my thoughts on this Memorial Day goes back to what it was like in Europe and Japan. And I can remember we had a man here, many of you will remember, Pete Grossman. Pete Grossman was in Europe during World War II as well, and one of his jobs was he was the guard for the prisoners that were going to the trials. And he would stand guard over them, and he told me many stories about that. But there's another type of captivity that we have to deal with, a captivity that affects every person here today because we've all fallen victim to it. Being captive to things of our past, decisions that we've made, sins that we've committed, those are tough things. And everyone is held captive to them one way or another. So what is holding you captive today? John chapter 8 verse 34, Jesus replied, "Very truly, I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin." So the very first thing we might think about is some sin that we have had in our life that even though we have prayed about it and we've gone to God about it and we've petitioned Him about it and we've begged for forgiveness, You mean to tell me that you just feel free from that? Most of us are letting the effects of that sin hold us hostage to some degree. So what is holding us hostage? In Psalms 116, verse 3, there it says, the cords of death entangled me, the anguish of grave came over me, I was overcome by distress and sorrow. Often we let, and this isn't necessarily sins, folks. It's bad choices that you've made. Is there anyone here who doesn't feel you've made some bad choices in life? Most of us would have to say, I've made a few bad choices along the way. Deb, don't speak up. All right, so sometimes we have to say that we've made some bad choices along the way. And we dwell on those failures and allow them to hold us captive. Everyone has regrets and baggage. And sometimes it's just tough to let go. Our captivity is when we're thinking of what might have been. When we think of what might have been. And folks, many of what might have been in your life probably weren't even sins. Some wrong choices. Okay, you've just graduated from high school, you're looking at your whole future and you make some wrong choices. What are those choices? Well, maybe you decide to forego college, but you've got an immediate scholarship and you don't go. And then whenever it's time to go, you found out it's going to cost you $10 gazillion to go. All right? So maybe you've made a bad choice there. Maybe there's been bad choices on your job selection. Maybe there's been bad choices on time management. You've just sitting back and waiting. Maybe you made a bad choice on your marriage. Maybe you're thinking, boy, she doesn't know how lucky she is to have me. So maybe that's what we're thinking. Does that sound familiar, Deb? Okay, so, you know, Deb could have married that other fella ahead of me. Just because he's a millionaire and has a very proper and personal type of great job, she got the best end of the deal, by the way. So maybe you think you made a mistake on your marriage. Maybe you think you made a mistake in raising your family. Maybe you think you made a mistake in your investments. You know, they told you that it was a bad time to invest in steamboats, invest in airplanes instead. But no, I think the steamboat's making a comeback. Maybe you've made a bad investment. Well, folks, there's a commercial. Let it go. All right, let it go. Sometimes we've just got to be able to let things go and move forward. So what is that liberating touch of Jesus? Because just a few of those things, there's two types of things that I've just mentioned to you. One are decisions that we've made that were sin, and we've all made them. And two, decisions that we've made that were bad choices that weren't necessarily sins, but, oh man, what was I thinking? Because now we're living with the consequences of whatever that might be. So what is that liberating touch of Jesus? No matter what kind of regrets or baggage that you have today, I have good news, and that good news is that Jesus is the real deal, folks. He's the real deal. He wants to help you. He has the power, the ability, and the desire to set you free from all of those things. He has that. Now get this. This is the key note. You may not choose to be free. You may choose to be captive. You may choose to dwell on those choices. You may choose to dwell on those sins. Now here's the part that's the kicker. He gives you that right to choose. But you don't have to choose that. You can choose to let Him liberate you. The 116th Psalm is basically, the psalmist is facing his mortality. He realizes that life could easily get away from him. And on doing that, because he's in a bad situation, he's calling upon the Lord to help him. In verse 8 it will say, "For you, Lord, have delivered me from death, my eyes from tears, my feet from stumbling." It says, "You've delivered my soul from death, my eyes from tears, and my feet from stumbling." Those are the three things I want to talk to you about today. Soul from death. Jesus frees us, folks, from that fear of eternal damnation. That falls under that first category of sin. Sin. Okay, so you've got this terrible sin in your life. And there are some sins that are just flatly terrible. And you've got this terrible sin in your life. And you've repented, you've talked to God about it, you've prayed about it, you've even got down on your knees and prayed about it. Because you're really wanting to be set free from this. You're wanting to think that that is behind you. Now it can be. You may never let it be here on earth. Everyone take note of that. You may never let it be here on earth. But you do not have to let it keep you out of eternity with God. Because Jesus has said He will handle that for us. Those things that are regrets and baggages, things that are just building up on us. So my soul is in stress because of sins. Those are things that we need to move on from. Things that we need to maybe adapt to. Okay, I've got this consequence, but I've got to adapt because my life is worth so much more. That I've got to look that that's an old situation and I've got new blessings in my life. Many times you're dwelling so much on those old situations that you miss the new blessings. Because we're missing the whole thing. So the very first thing he says is about your soul. The very first thing the psalmist wants you to know is make your soul right with God. Now that doesn't mean that everything else in your life is going to be right with God, folks. It means that you're trying to make it right. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to have that residue of sin that you're trying hard to scrub off. I used some, the other day I found a hole in the house. Remember my problem last week? I had this little creature in my bedroom. So I found this hole. And I got a can of this spray foam. All right? I got 2 cans of this spray foam. And I just keep sticking it in there and squirting this thing. Well, then the nozzle broke off, so I squirted it in just with my hand. I want you to know my fingers were like this for a week. That spray foam, it sticks you together. And I'm thinking, he's not going to get back in my house, but I couldn't pick him up if I did. Because my fingers are stuck together. And I keep scrubbing and scrubbing and trying to peel it off. I peeled the flesh off a couple places, trying to get that stuff off. The residue of the spray foam lasted for a week. All right? It really wasn't pleasant. Finally, it went away. I tried everything. I tried gasoline. I tried fingernail polish remover. I tried yelling at my hand. I tried it all. I just couldn't be set free from it. Sometimes that's the way sin is. You just don't feel like you can be set free from it. But the truth of the matter was, the problem was fixed. The hole was full of foam. The problem was fixed. I just had some residue I had to work through. That's the way sin is. Sometimes we have to work through the residue. The second thing that he would say in the Psalms are eyes from tears. Some people refuse to move on from their regrets and their baggage. They choose to continue to grieve over missed opportunities. Or they continue to grieve over mistakes that they have made. Crying out to God, change this. Now everyone take note. They're unchangeable. You can change the consequences of them. You can change the direction that you're going. But something that you did in 1968 can't be changed in 2017. It's already happened. It's done. It's over. You can't change it. No matter if you were the high school bully, you can't change that. You go to your class reunion, they're still going to say, oh, here comes the high school bully. They're still going to know it. You can't change it. If you're the kid that rode the motorcycle down the hall at school, they still know it. You know, they're going to say, oh, there's a kid that was riding on the handlebars of the motorcycle. They're still going to know it. If you're the kid that got kicked out of class and took an act to the school board to get you back in, they're still going to know it. You can't change those things. I don't know anyone that did any of those, by the way. It's still going to happen. It's life. Move on. Christ wants to liberate you, to set you free from those tears that carry regret and baggage. Regret, I can think of a regret. It may take you time to take a fresh look at your situation. I was here I left here in 1979, and for the next 9 years, I regretted leaving. I know you all didn't miss me, but I missed you. I regretted leaving. It was a tough thing. I had those regrets. But you know, during those 9 years, I learned a whole lot of stuff. I got to experience a whole lot of things. I got to live in a whole lot of neat places. But I always had regrets. I can't change that. You know, if I hadn't left, no one would catch the record of the years I'm going to have. No one. But it's not about setting records. I regretted those years, but I can't change it. Can't change it. So what do? You have to take a fresh look at where you're at and say, you know, I'm so thankful, God, of where I'm at today. I'm thankful of what's going on in my life. Is there a reason or the blessings in your life right now that you're neglecting to see? The psalmist, read the psalm there, the psalmist, he identifies some things that he neglected to see and things that he needed to see. Are there some blessings in your life that you're neglecting to see today? Perhaps your job isn't what you wanted it to be. We'll pick on that one right now. Perhaps you're in a career that you didn't want. Let me ask you, do you have a roof over your head? That's better than half the world. Do you have food on your table? That's better than 2/3 of the world. But yet you're saying, well, I regret it. I'm in a job I don't really like. Well, you got two choices. You want to eat? You don't want to eat. Stay at that job until you get another one. Sometimes that's what we do. And you may say, well, I regret that. You have to sometimes move on from where you're at. You have to see that many people spend life crying about what might have been. There's a lot of things that might have been. But we've got this God who has set us free. And I can't be looking back at what might have been. I got to be looking ahead of what can be. Because this is what can be with Jesus. I can't change that. But I can make my future better. He says he delivers us. He delivered my feet from stumbling. Many times because of regrets and baggage, it gets in our way. And we stumble because we're always looking back at what might have been instead of looking ahead at where we can be. We're always looking back thinking, oh, I wished I had, instead of looking ahead and saying, I'm going to make it happen. It's about us. Everyone has those wish-to-hads. Every one of us do. Well, I wished I'd done that. I wished I'd taken my cholesterol medicine, folks, but I didn't. You know, you sometimes feel guilty for your own circumstances. The doctor said you got a long history of heart problem. You better take this cholesterol medicine or it's going to plug you up. I said, I don't live like those other people did. I'm good to go. Little did I know heredity is heredity any way you look at it. It's easy to say, I wished I had. Instead, now it's moving on. Opportunities, mistakes, regrets, they're all in the past. Christ wants to bless you today. He wants to bless your current walk. Those days are over. 1968 is gone. He wants to bless your current walk. He wants you to walk and rejoice in the land of the living. So many of us live in the land of the dead. Yesterday's dead and gone, folks. It's over. He wants to bless us in the land of the living. What's going on in our life today? What's going on in our world today? What can we do today? How can we be sure all of this is true? Over in Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 8. You see, at just the right time, when you were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. That was me back in the 60s. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous man, though for a good man, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates His own love for us in this. Get this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So how can I know this is true? Because why would God give up his son? Why would Jesus die if he had not intended for us to live and to live a more abundant life? He did this because we were lost. We were held captive. So, what can be gained by doing everything that I've just told you? With your soul, with your sight, and with your feet. What can be gained? What can be gained? When we truly let Jesus touch our lives, folks, and that's where I want you to be today. If you truly let Jesus touch your life, a wonderful blessing can be yours. Philippians chapter 4, verse 7, and the peace of God which transcends, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The peace of God will guard your heart and your mind. If your heart is stuck in those days in the past, if your mind is stuck on sins of the past, let Christ guard it for you. Let him correct your thinking. Now the key word is peace. I've told you many times, life isn't easy for me. I fight at it. It's a constant battle. I don't know anyone who has to work at it like I do. I have to work at it. I have to work at having peace. There's times that I'm mad at myself. I have to work at having peace in my life. But the only way for me to have that peace in life is through God, through Christ, who is beyond my understanding how he can give me those times of rest. Because that's what he does for us. Now the key factor is learn how to accept that every day, every hour. I'm working on that one. That's a sermon in the future. I'm trying to help you make it happen right now. I need help right now to be at peace. So he will do that. Psalms 29 and verse 11 will say this. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord bless his people with peace. He gives you strength to face those obstacles that you're up against. And here's that key word again. He gives you peace. Most of us do not have peace in our life. Most of us are battling with those things of the past. Most of us are thinking those sins that are overwhelming, those I wished I had. I should have done this. I wished I'd done that. I wished it'd gone this way. I wished I'd done something else. I wish. Most of us have some degree of that, whether you want to admit that today or not. Most of us are dealing with some degree of that. That, folks, takes strength to overcome. And he says he will give us the strength to do that. That's not something you can just walk away from. That's not something you just walk away and say, well, that's all behind me. Has that worked for anyone? I didn't think so. You have to work at it. And then he says he'll give you peace. I got one more scripture I want to use. John chapter 16, verse 33. We'll work right into that one. In John chapter 16, verse 33, he said, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. There's that word again. For in this world you have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Two things that you need to see. The world is filled with trouble. And most of the trouble that is filled with are regrets and I wished I had. Most of the trouble that it is filled with is because we've not been set free from those things of our past. Most of the trouble that plagues you is because of some type of regret. He says the world is filled with trouble. It's filled with trouble. But he says he has overcome the world. Now, if you are walking hand in hand, if you're asking Jesus, the touch of Jesus, to come into your life, he can lead you past that. And then it goes back to that thing of peace, and he can give you that peace. See, the touch of Jesus is liberating. The world is being held captive, folks, by all those I wished I had, by all of those regrets, all those sins. It's the best tool Satan has, is to make you look back instead of looking forward. The best tool that the devil has is to make you look back and think, oh man, I missed that. I'm so sorry about that. Oh, I wished I could do that again. You know, I wished I could hit a softball again. I've got trifocals. The last time one was coming at me, I had to duck. Used to, I could at least hit one. Okay. Get on, Mike. You're 65 years old. You don't need to hit a softball. I'm just happy to swat at a bee once in a while and hit it. And I use a big badminton racket. Anyone else do that? I love to battle those bees. Now the problem is, I'm not near as good at it as I used to be. Or those bees are a whole lot faster. I'm not for sure which it is. See, there's always those things of the past. Let me close with this. What are you looking forward to? I don't want to know what you're looking back to. I want to know what you're looking forward to. What blessing are you looking forward to? I believe that God is going to provide this blessing in my life, and man, I can't wait. What are you looking forward to? What are you wanting God to do in your home? What are you wanting to do in your family? What are you wanting to do in your personal life? Do you have any idea? What did you do in 1968 that's still haunting you? Some of you can remember 68 besides me. See, we know what that is. But you mean we've not identified that something for the future that we're wanting God to do in our life? Oh, I've got some prayers for the future that I'm working on every day. I work on this one about peace. God, give me peace. I thank you for the peace that I've had today, and I pray that I'm going to have peace yet this day. God, thank you for the opportunity that I've just had. And God, I pray that I'm going to have another opportunity in the next hour. God, thank you for how you've loved me, and now give me an opportunity to spread that love. God, did I tell you that in 1968, will you all please stand as we have our invitation?